The sky was a soft gray that afternoon, the kind that promised rain but held back just long enough to keep people guessing. The street was quiet except for the hum of cars in the distance and the soft squeak of sneakers on wet pavement. A 17-year-old boy walked down the sidewalk with his backpack slung over one shoulder, earphones in, and a tired but peaceful look on his face. He had just finished basketball practice and was thinking about what leftovers might be waiting for him at home. He wasn't the type to cause trouble or draw attention. Most people in his neighborhood knew him as the kid who always helped carry groceries or mowed lawns for the older folks down the street. He lived a simple life: school, basketball, homework, repeat. That day felt no different. But sometimes life doesn't warn you before it changes everything. As he turned a corner, he noticed a car parked awkwardly on the side of the road, the hood up and a faint trail of steam rising into the chilly air. At first he thought maybe someone was just checking something under the hood. But then he saw her, a woman standing beside the car, one hand gripping the door for support and the other pressed against her stomach. Even from a distance, he could see she was in trouble. She looked like she might collapse any moment. Her face was pale, her breathing uneven, and her clothes were damp with sweat even though the air was cool. Without thinking twice, he pulled out his earphones and jogged closer. "Hey, are you okay?" he called out, his voice uncertain but full of concern. The woman looked up at him with wide, panicked eyes. I think something's wrong," she stammered, her voice shaking. "My car broke down, and I'm having contractions." The boy froze for a second, his heart jumping. He wasn't sure he'd heard her right. "Contractions?" he repeated, almost whispering. She nodded quickly, gripping the car even tighter. "I'm 8 months pregnant. I was trying to get to the hospital, but the car, it just stopped. I don't know what to do." Rain began to sprinkle lightly, tiny drops darkening the pavement between them. The boy immediately dropped his bag and stepped closer. Okay, it's fine. Just sit down for a second, all right? I'll call for help." He guided her gently to the passenger seat of the car, making sure she was comfortable. She was trembling, her breathing fast and shallow. He could see the pain on her face, and it scared him more than he wanted to admit. He reached for his phone, pressing the power button, but the screen flashed red. 5% battery left. "Come on, not now," he muttered under his breath. The woman's voice cracked. "Please, I can't do this alone." "You're not alone," he said quickly, trying to sound calm. "I'm here. I'm calling 911 right now." He dialed as fast as his shaking fingers allowed. When the dispatcher picked up, he explained everything: where they were, what was happening, and that she was in labor. The dispatcher's voice was calm but serious. "Okay, help is on the way. Try to keep her calm. How far apart are her contractions?" He looked at her helplessly. Ma'am, how far apart are they?" She tried to speak through a wave of pain. "Every few minutes," she gasped. He repeated it to the dispatcher. "They're pretty close together." "All right," said the voice on the line. "Stay with her. If anything changes..." But before she could finish, the call cut out. His phone screen went black. No, come on," he pleaded, pressing the buttons again and again. The phone wouldn't turn back on. The rain started coming down harder now, tapping against the car roof in quick, nervous rhythms. He could feel his heart beating just as fast. He looked around the empty road. No other cars, no houses nearby, just the sound of the rain and the woman's labored breathing. He took off his hoodie and draped it over her shoulders. "It's gonna be all right. The ambulance is on the way." She nodded weakly, but tears started rolling down her cheeks. "I was on my way to my sister's house," she whispered. "She was supposed to take me to the hospital. I thought I had more time." He didn't know what to say. He wasn't used to comforting people in moments like this. All he could do was stay beside her, trying to keep her calm. He remembered his mom always saying that sometimes the best thing you can do is just be there for someone. He looked through the windshield. The rain blurred everything, turning the world into gray streaks. The wind picked up and he could feel a chill run through his body. Still, he stayed close. "Do you have anyone I can call?" he asked gently. "My phone died," she said, shaking her head. "There's no one nearby. Please don't leave me." He swallowed hard. "I won't." Minutes passed like hours. Every few moments, she'd grab his arm and cry out as another contraction hit. Each time he told her to breathe, trying to keep his own fear hidden. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He was just a teenager, but somehow, He was the only person standing between this woman and a situation that could go terribly wrong. Then, she gasped suddenly, her eyes wide. "Something's happening," she said. "I think it's coming." The boy froze. "What?" No, you said 8 months and it's too early, right?" She didn't answer. She just leaned back, gripping the seat tightly, breathing hard. The boy felt panic surge through his chest. He looked toward the road again, praying to see flashing lights. Nothing, just the endless sound of rain. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "Okay, just hang on. I'm going to flag someone down." He ran to the edge of the street, waving his arms as a car passed by, but it didn't stop. Another one swerved around him, honking as it sped off. The rain was heavier now, soaking through his clothes. He ran back to the car. She was crying softly, clutching her stomach. "It hurts. Oh God, it hurts." He opened the door again, crouching beside her. "You're doing great, okay? Just keep breathing like this." He mimicked deep, steady breaths, even though his heart was racing. In, out. The woman nodded weakly, trying to follow his rhythm. He wiped the rain from his face and looked around again. He wished anyone would show up. But the road stayed empty. He thought about his mom, about how she always told him that doing the right thing doesn't need permission. You just do it. He didn't know much about childbirth, but he knew he couldn't leave her. He had to stay until help arrived no matter what. So he talked to her. Not about hospitals or pain, but about anything that could distract her. "What's your name?" he asked softly. She took a shaky breath. It's Maya." "Okay, Maya," he said. "You're doing amazing. I promise you're not alone." "What's your baby's name?" She smiled faintly through tears. "Haven't decided yet. Maybe something strong." He nodded. "Yeah, I think that's perfect." For a moment, the tension eased. The boy sat there beside her, his hoodie still wrapped around her shoulders, both of them listening to the sound of rain. Then another contraction hit and she cried out again. Okay, he said, trying to sound calm. "Just breathe. We're gonna get through this." He didn't realize it, but his hands were trembling. His phone was dead, the rain was pouring, and night was starting to fall. Streetlights flickered on one by one, casting a dim orange glow across the wet pavement. He thought he heard sirens in the distance. He turned his head quickly, but it was just the wind playing tricks on him. "Please," Maya whispered. "Don't let me lose my baby." Her words hit him like a knife. He swallowed hard, fighting the lump in his throat. "You won't, you hear me? You're both gonna be fine." He didn't know if he believed it, but he had to make her believe it. The rain slowed a little, just enough for him to hear her breathing settle into a shaky rhythm. He reached for his bag, pulling out a half-empty bottle of water, and handed it to her. "Here, take a sip, slowly." She nodded and took a small drink, her hands trembling. "Thank you," she whispered. He smiled faintly. "No problem. You'd do the same for me, right?" That made her laugh. Just a small laugh, but enough to ease the fear in the air. For a while, they just sat there. Two strangers connected by something neither had planned for. He could see the pain on her face, but also the strength. She wasn't giving up. Then in the distance, he finally heard it. Sirens. This time, real ones. The sound cut through the rain like hope breaking through the clouds. He jumped up, waving his arms again until he saw the flashing lights approaching fast. Relief flooded through him so powerfully that his knees almost gave out. When the ambulance pulled over, he pointed to the car. "She's in there. She's in labor." The paramedics rushed to the car, opening the doors and checking her immediately. The boy stepped back, soaked from head to toe, his heart still racing. One of the paramedics looked at him and said, "You did good, kid. You stayed calm. That helped more than you know." He didn't feel calm. His hands were still shaking. But he nodded anyway. As they loaded Maya onto the stretcher, she looked up at him and reached for his hand. "Don't go," she whispered. "Please come with me." He hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Okay." He climbed into the back of the ambulance beside her, still clutching his dead phone, still dripping rainwater onto the floor. He didn't know what was going to happen next, but deep down something told him that his life, and hers, was never going to be the same after this night. The ambulance doors closed, and the sound of the siren rose into the air as they sped toward the hospital. Outside, the rain finally began to stop. The inside of the ambulance was cold and bright, filled with the beeping of small machines and the smell of disinfectant. The young boy sat in the corner, still dripping rainwater, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't know what to do except watch as the paramedics worked quickly around the woman. She lay on the stretcher, breathing hard, her hands gripping the edges of the blanket. One of the paramedics spoke softly to her, trying to keep her calm while the other checked her pulse and belly. "Contractions are close," one of them said quietly. "She might not make it to the hospital before the baby comes." The boy's eyes widened. He didn't fully understand what that meant, but the seriousness in their voices scared him. He looked at the woman, who was clearly in pain but trying to stay strong. One of the paramedics noticed the boy staring and gave him a small nod. "You did good, kid. Most people would have just walked away." He didn't know how to respond. He just nodded slowly, his fingers nervously twisting the edge of his wet hoodie. The ambulance sped down the road, bouncing slightly over each bump. The siren wailed loudly, echoing off the dark, empty streets. The rain had slowed, but the air still carried a heavy chill. The woman turned her head slightly toward him. "You're still here," she whispered between breaths. "Of course," he said quietly. "I'm not leaving until I know you're okay." Her lips trembled into a weak smile. "You didn't even know me," she said softly. He shrugged. "Doesn't matter. You needed help." For a few moments, the sound of her breathing and the siren were the only things that filled the space. Then the driver shouted something over the radio. The boy couldn't hear all the words, but he caught pieces. "Traffic jam, accident ahead, reroute." The paramedic cursed under his breath. "We're going to be delayed. Maybe 15-20 minutes. The woman groaned in pain again, tears rolling down her cheeks. "I can't wait that long," she cried. "It's coming." "I can feel it." The boy's stomach twisted. He looked at the paramedics. "Can't you do something?" One of them sighed and grabbed a small bag from the shelf. "We might have to deliver right here," he said firmly. "It's not ideal, but we've done it before." The other nodded. "Let's prep just in case." The boy pressed himself back into the seat, his heart racing even faster. He couldn't believe what was happening. A few hours ago, he was just walking home from practice, thinking about dinner. Now he was sitting in an ambulance watching strangers prepare to deliver a baby. The woman cried out again, clutching her stomach. "Please help me." The paramedics moved quickly, setting up a small kit, pulling on gloves, and giving calm but urgent instructions. "Ma'am, just breathe. We're right here with you. Try to stay still." The boy leaned forward, trying to catch her hand. "You're okay," he said softly. "You're doing amazing." She squeezed his hand tightly, her knuckles turning white. "Don't go," she whispered. "I won't," he said. And he meant it. The ambulance shook slightly as it hit a bump. One of the paramedics braced himself against the wall, muttering something into the radio again. The other checked the woman's condition and nodded. "She's close. Very close." The boy felt lightheaded. He didn't want to look, but couldn't turn away either. He could see the pain on her face, the fear in her eyes, but also something else. Determination. She was fighting through every second. He glanced at the paramedic. "Is she going to be okay?" The man gave a short nod. "If she keeps calm and we keep steady, yes. But we need to move fast." Another contraction hit, stronger than before. The woman screamed, her whole body tense. The sound filled the small space, and the boy's heart nearly broke. He wanted to help, but didn't know how. "Hey," he said softly, leaning closer. "You've got this. Just breathe like before, in, out, slow." She tried, following his rhythm. It wasn't perfect, but it helped. Her breathing steadied just enough for the paramedics to work. Minutes passed like hours. The boy could feel sweat mixing with the rain on his skin. He kept thinking about his mom, how she always said that real courage isn't loud or perfect, it's doing the right thing even when you're scared out of your mind. That was exactly how he felt now. Then suddenly the ambulance slowed down. The driver shouted something, another delay. Roadblock ahead. They couldn't move forward. The paramedic swore quietly under his breath. "We're out of time." He turned to his partner. "We're doing this here." The woman cried out again, her voice cracking. "Please just help me." The boy felt his heart drop. He wanted to look away, but the paramedic turned to him suddenly. "Hey, I need you to keep her talking. Don't let her panic. Just talk to her, okay? Me?" he asked, startled. "Yes, you. She trusts you. Keep her focused. Tell her she's doing great." He nodded quickly, swallowing the lump in his throat. "Okay." He turned back to her, holding her hand tightly. "You're strong," he said softly. "Stronger than you think. Just keep breathing. You're gonna see your baby soon, okay?" She nodded weakly, tears streaming down her face. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know," he said. "But you're not alone. I'm right here." The paramedics worked calmly but quickly, giving instructions in low voices. The boy couldn't see everything, but he could feel the intensity in the air. Every second felt like forever. The woman gripped his hand tighter, crying out again. "It hurts," she said through gritted teeth. "I know," he said, his voice shaking. "But you're doing so good. You're the bravest person I've ever met." The paramedic gave him a quick look, half gratitude, half focus, then turned back to his work. "Okay, deep breath." "Almost there," he said to her. She took a long, shaky breath and squeezed the boy's hand again. He winced from the pressure but didn't pull away. He wouldn't let go. And then, amid all the chaos, the shaking ambulance, the flashing lights outside, the pounding of his heart, there was a new sound. A small, sharp cry. The boy froze. The woman's eyes widened. The paramedics looked at each other with relief. "It's out," one of them said softly, smiling. "It's a baby girl." The air seemed to change in an instant. The tension broke, replaced by something so powerful and quiet it almost felt unreal. The woman started sobbing, her hands trembling as she reached out. The paramedic wrapped the tiny newborn in a blanket and placed her gently in her mother's arms. "She's breathing fine," he said. "You both did great." The boy sat there staring at the little bundle. The baby's cry was small but strong, like a signal to the world that she was here to stay. The woman looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "You stayed," she whispered. "You didn't leave me." He smiled faintly, his throat tight. "Told you I wouldn't." The paramedics quickly checked the baby and mother again, making sure everything was stable. The driver finally managed to get the ambulance moving once more, heading toward the nearest hospital. The boy leaned back in his seat, exhausted but filled with a strange, warm feeling he couldn't describe. His hands were still shaking, but now it was from relief, not fear. He looked at the baby again, tiny and peaceful in her mother's arms. He'd never seen anything so fragile yet so alive. The paramedic sat across from him, shaking his head with a small smile. "You've got guts, kid. Not everyone would have stayed calm like that." He laughed quietly, still catching his breath. "I wasn't calm. I was terrified." "That's what makes it brave," the man replied. The rest of the ride passed in a blur. The boy kept glancing at the mother and her baby, making sure they were okay. Every so often, she'd look back and smile weakly at him, her eyes full of gratitude. When they finally reached the hospital, nurses rushed out to meet them. The boy stepped out into the cool night air, feeling like the whole world had slowed down. His clothes were still damp, his shoes heavy with rain, but he barely noticed. As they rolled the stretcher toward the emergency entrance, the woman reached for his hand one last time. "Thank you," she whispered. He smiled. "You don't have to thank me." She squeezed his hand. "Yes, I do. You saved us." Before he could respond, the nurses took her inside. The doors closed behind them, leaving him standing in the quiet night surrounded by the faint glow of the hospital lights. He took a deep breath and looked up at the sky. The rain had stopped completely now, and a few stars had started to appear. He didn't know her full story, where she came from, what she was going through, but he knew that night would stay with him forever. He turned to one of the paramedics who was packing up the ambulance. "Is she going to be okay?" The man nodded. "Yeah, thanks to you, she and the baby made it just in time." The boy smiled, feeling something deep inside him shift, like he'd just witnessed a miracle. He started walking home, his wet shoes squeaking with every step. But this time he didn't mind. The world felt different now. Bigger somehow. Brighter. And though he didn't realize it yet, that night had only been the beginning. The next morning, the boy woke up to the faint sound of birds outside his window. For a few seconds, everything felt normal. The same small room, the same old posters on the wall, and the soft sunlight sneaking through the curtains. But then, as his eyes opened fully, the memories from the night before rushed back like a wave. The rain, the broken-down car, the woman's cries, the flashing ambulance lights, the tiny baby's first sound. It all felt unreal. He sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes. His clothes from last night were still in a pile on the floor, damp and muddy from the rain. He stared at them for a moment, then smiled faintly. It hadn't been a dream. It really happened. Downstairs, the smell of breakfast drifted through the air. Eggs, toast, and the faint scent of coffee. His mom was already up, humming softly to herself. As he walked into the kitchen, she looked up from the stove. "Morning," she said with a smile. "You came home late last night." "I almost called the police." He hesitated, scratching the back of his neck. "Yeah, sorry about that." "Something happened." Her smile faded a little. "Something bad?" He shook his head quickly. "No, not bad. Just crazy. There was this woman, her car broke down. She was pregnant and she went into labor right there on the road." His mom froze, turning fully toward him. "What did you just say?" He nodded slowly. "She had her baby in the ambulance. I was there." Her mouth opened slightly, eyes wide. "You were there? You helped?" He nodded again quietly. "Yeah." For a moment she just stared at him. Then her eyes softened and she came over, placing her hands on his shoulders. "You did something incredible," she said softly. "Not everyone would have stopped." He shrugged. "I just did what felt right." "That's exactly why it's incredible," she said, her voice proud. He sat down at the table and she poured him a cup of coffee, still watching him like she couldn't quite believe what she was hearing. "Did the woman make it to the hospital okay?" "Yeah," he said, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "They both did. The baby's fine." His mom let out a deep sigh of relief. "Thank God, you must have been terrified." He laughed softly. "You have no idea." The rest of breakfast passed quietly. His mom kept glancing at him, clearly trying to process everything. For him, it still didn't feel real either. After he ate, he decided to walk to the hospital. He didn't even know if visitors were allowed, but something inside him told him he needed to check on them, to make sure they were truly okay. The hospital was about a mile away, and the sun was warm on his face as he walked. The city looked different today, brighter somehow. Maybe it was just the feeling inside him, or maybe it was because he'd seen something so raw and powerful that the world itself seemed new. When he reached the front desk, he hesitated. I was here last night. I came in with a woman who had her baby in the ambulance." The nurse looked up, eyes curious. "Do you know her name?" He realized he didn't. They hadn't even had time to exchange full names in all the chaos. Her name's Maya, I think." The nurse typed something quickly into her computer, then smiled. "Room 214. She's doing fine and the baby's healthy." He nodded in relief. "Thanks." As he walked down the hallway, his heart started to race again. He didn't know what he was going to say when he saw her. Would she even remember him? He stopped at the door marked 214 and knocked gently. "Come in," said a soft voice. He opened the door slowly. The room was quiet, filled with the faint beeping of a heart monitor and the soft cooing of a newborn. The woman was sitting up in bed, her baby wrapped in a pink blanket beside her. When she looked up and saw him, her eyes widened in surprise. Then she smiled. "You came," she said. He grinned shyly. "Just wanted to see if you were okay." She nodded. "We're more than okay. The doctor said she's perfectly healthy." She looked down at the baby with so much love that it made his chest tighten. "All thanks to you," he shook his head. "No thanks to the paramedics," she smiled gently. "No thanks to you. You stayed when you didn't have to. You held my hand. You helped me breathe. You have no idea what that meant." He didn't know how to respond. His cheeks turned slightly red. "I just did what anyone would do." "Not everyone would," she said quietly. "Most people would have kept walking. But you didn't." He looked at the baby, who was sleeping peacefully now, her tiny hand resting on her mother's arm. "She's beautiful," he said softly. "She is," the woman said with a smile. "I named her Hope." He looked up at her, surprised. "Hope?" "Yeah," she said. "Because that's what you gave me last night. Hope." He swallowed hard, feeling something heavy in his throat. He didn't know what to say. Before he could speak again, there was a soft knock on the door and a nurse poked her head in. "You've got visitors, Maya," she said with a small smile. 2 people entered, a man and an older woman. The moment they saw the baby, they gasped with joy. The older woman hurried over, tears already in her eyes. "Oh my goodness, she's perfect." Maya laughed, her voice filled with warmth. "Mom, this is her. This is Hope." The older woman turned to the boy curiously. "And who's this young man?" Maya smiled proudly. "This is the one who helped me. He's the reason Hope's here today." The room went silent for a moment. Then the older woman stepped forward and took his hand. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling. "You're a blessing." He shook his head, embarrassed. She didn't let him finish. She hugged him tightly, her voice muffled. You saved my daughter and my grandbaby. We'll never forget you. He stood there awkwardly, not used to so much attention, but deep down, it warmed him in a way he couldn't explain. After a few minutes, he said he should go, not wanting to intrude on their family moment. But before he could leave, Maya called out, "Wait!" He turned back. She smiled softly. "I want you to come by again, I mean it. You're part of our story now." He nodded slowly, smiling. "I'd like that." As he walked out of the hospital, he felt lighter than he had in a long time. It wasn't just relief, it was something deeper. A quiet joy that came from knowing he had made a difference. That afternoon, when he got home, his mom was sitting on the couch watching the local news. The screen showed a picture of an ambulance parked on a wet street. The headline read, "Teen helps deliver baby during storm." He froze. "Wait, that's me." His mom looked up, grinning. "You're on TV." The news anchor's voice was calm but full of emotion. A high school student became an unexpected hero last night after helping a woman in distress deliver her baby during a heavy rainstorm. Both mother and child are safe thanks to his quick thinking and bravery. They showed a brief clip from the hospital, a nurse talking about how he kept the mother calm and helped the paramedics. His mom's eyes filled with tears. "I'm so proud of you," she said softly. He smiled sheepishly. "I didn't do it for that." "I know," she said. "That's what makes it special." The next few days were strange. People at school started whispering when he walked by. Some came up to him, patting his back, calling him hero. He didn't like the attention, but he smiled and thanked them anyway. He didn't think of himself as a hero. He just saw a person who needed help. Still, every time he thought of the baby, of hope, he felt something shift inside him. Maybe this was what people meant when they said some moments change you forever. Later that week, he got a message from the hospital saying someone wanted to see him. When he arrived, Maya was sitting in the waiting area with a small gift bag beside her. "I didn't know what to get you," she said, smiling shyly. "But I wanted to give you something." He opened the bag and found a photo frame inside. Inside the frame was a picture of the baby wrapped in a blanket, eyes barely open. Below it, in neat handwriting, were the words, "To the one who gave us hope." He didn't say anything for a few seconds. He just stared at the photo, feeling his throat tighten again. "Thank you," he said quietly. "No," she said, shaking her head. "Thank you." He smiled, holding the frame carefully as if it were made of glass. When he left the hospital, he looked up at the sky again. The clouds were gone, and the sun was shining brighter than it had all week. It felt like the whole world was reminding him that good things still happened, sometimes in the most unexpected ways. He didn't tell anyone this, but that night before he went to bed, he placed the photo on his nightstand. Every time he looked at it, he remembered the rain, the fear, the sound of that first cry, and how in one night 2 lives had changed forever. He didn't know what would come next. Maybe people would forget about the story in a few weeks. Maybe life would go back to normal. But deep down, he knew something had shifted for good. Sometimes the smallest moments, one act of kindness, one choice to stop and help, can ripple through the world in ways you never expect. And that's exactly what had just begun. The story had been all over the local news for almost a week now. Everywhere the boy went, people seemed to recognize him. Strangers waved when he passed by on the street. Teachers congratulated him in the hallways. Even the principal stopped him one morning and said, "You've made our school proud." He smiled politely every time, but deep down, the attention made him uncomfortable. He hadn't done it for praise or fame. He just wanted to help. That was all. One afternoon, as he walked home from school, he noticed a group of kids from another class whispering and pointing. When he got closer, he heard one of them say, "That's the guy from the news." "The baby guy." He couldn't help but laugh a little. "The baby guy," he said under his breath. It sounded funny, but in a way, it reminded him of that night, how real and terrifying and beautiful it had been. When he got home, his mom was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone. "You're online again," she said with a grin. "Someone shared your story on a big news page," he groaned. "Seriously? Again?" She laughed. "Don't sound so upset. People are just proud of you. You did something good and the world noticed. That's rare." He nodded but stayed quiet. Deep down, he liked that people were being inspired, but part of him wished things could go back to normal. He missed walking through the halls without everyone staring. That night, he sat at his desk and opened his laptop. He typed his name into the search bar, half curious, half nervous. Dozens of articles popped up. Some called him the teen hero. Others used words like brave or inspiring. But as he scrolled further, he started seeing a different kind of comment. Not everyone was kind. One post read, "There's no way this story is true. Probably made up for attention." Another said, "He just wanted to be on TV. People do anything these days." And one that hit him hardest. They only called him a hero because it looks good in the news. If it were someone else, they'd ignore it. His heart sank. He hadn't expected everyone to cheer for him, but seeing those words stung more than he wanted to admit. He wasn't trying to be a hero. He wasn't looking for attention. He'd just done what anyone with a heart should have done. He closed his laptop, trying to shake off the thoughts, but they lingered like a shadow. The next day at school, he felt the difference. Some people still smiled and waved, but others whispered quietly when he passed. A few even joked behind his back, pretending to act out the story. "Oh no, my water broke," one kid said, clutching his stomach dramatically. Laughter followed. He didn't say anything. He just kept walking, pretending it didn't bother him. But it did. That afternoon, he sat alone on the bleachers behind the gym, staring at the empty basketball court. Usually, the court was his favorite place, a space where he could forget everything else. But today, even the bounce of the ball echoing in his head couldn't drown out the noise from the world outside. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his messages. One stood out, a text from an unknown number. "Hey, it's me." The woman from the hospital. He blinked. It took him a moment to realize it was from Maya. He smiled for the first time that day. She continued, "Hope and I are doing great. I wanted to thank you again. We're having a little get-together this weekend. Please come. You're family to us now." He stared at the screen for a while before typing back, "I'll be there." Saturday came sooner than he expected. He wore a clean shirt, combed his hair, and grabbed the small gift his mom helped him pick out, a stuffed bunny for the baby. When he arrived at the small apartment complex, Maya greeted him at the door with a huge smile. She looked healthier, happier. The baby was asleep in a tiny carrier beside the couch, wrapped in the same pink blanket as before. "You made it," she said, giving him a quick hug. Come in, come in." Inside, a few family members were gathered, her mother, sister, and a couple of friends. The room was filled with laughter, soft music, and the faint smell of home-cooked food. The moment they saw him, everyone smiled. "That's him," Maya said proudly. "That's the one who saved us." The older woman stood up, tears already in her eyes. "You again," she said warmly. "I've been waiting to see you." "I didn't get to thank you properly last time." The boy tried to protest, but she shook her head. "You don't understand what you did for us. My daughter was alone. You were her guardian angel that night." He didn't know what to say. He just nodded quietly, his cheeks burning. They ate together, shared stories, and laughed. He found himself smiling more than he had in days. Every now and then he'd glance at the baby, tiny and peaceful, sleeping through all the noise. It was hard to believe that just a few weeks ago, she was fighting to enter the world in the middle of a storm. As the evening went on, Maya told him more about her life, how she'd lost her job before the baby came, how she was trying to rebuild things, and how scared she'd been that night. "I didn't know where to go," she admitted quietly. "I thought I'd have to do it all alone. But then you showed up. Out of nowhere. I still think it was fate," he smiled softly. "Maybe it was just timing." She shook her head. "No, it was more than that. You reminded me that good people still exist." The words touched him deeply. For the first time in days, he felt peace. But not everyone outside that little apartment saw the story the same way. The next morning, a new video about the event appeared online. Someone had edited his interviews and added dramatic music, calling him the miracle teen. It got thousands of views overnight. The comments were split. Some praised him endlessly. Others mocked the video, saying it was exaggerated. He tried not to read them anymore, but it was impossible to avoid. Every time he opened his phone, there it was, his face, his name, his story. It didn't feel like his anymore. It belonged to the internet now. He started avoiding the news. Even when people congratulated him, he only smiled and changed the subject. He didn't want the story to become something fake or forced. A few days later, while walking home from school, a news van pulled up beside him. A reporter leaned out of the window. "Hey, you're the kid who delivered that baby, right? Can we get a quick interview?" He froze for a second. No thanks, sorry. Just a few questions," the reporter insisted. "The world loves your story." He shook his head and walked faster. He didn't owe anyone an explanation. He'd done what he could. The rest wasn't up to him. That evening he went to the basketball court again. It was empty, just the way he liked it. He sat on the bench, bouncing the ball lightly against the ground. The echo filled the air like a heartbeat. He thought about everything, how a single moment had turned his life upside down. He never asked for it, but maybe that was the point. Sometimes life chooses you for things you don't plan for. While he sat there lost in thought, he heard footsteps behind him. He turned and saw Maya walking toward him, holding a stroller. "I figured I'd find you here," she said with a smile. He grinned. "What are you doing out here?" "I wanted to get some air," she said. "And Hope's been fussy. Thought a little walk might help." He looked down at the stroller. The baby was sleeping again, tiny fingers curled around the edge of a blanket. "She's getting big," he said softly. "She is," Maya said proudly, "and she's strong. Just like the night she was born." They sat together in silence for a while, watching the sun dip below the horizon. "You know," she said after a moment, "people will always talk. Some will praise you, some will doubt you, but none of them were there that night. They don't know what you did or how much it meant." He looked at her, then nodded. "Yeah, I guess that's true," she smiled. "What matters is what's real. You helped bring a life into this world. That's something no words online can change." He didn't respond right away. Instead, he watched the baby sleep, the setting sun painting her face in soft gold. After a while, Maya stood up. "Come by tomorrow if you can," she said. "My mom's making dinner." "And Hope misses her hero," he laughed. "She doesn't even know who I am yet." "Trust me," Maya said with a grin. "She will." As she walked away, pushing the stroller gently down the sidewalk, he sat back and let the cool breeze brush against his face. Maybe the world would keep talking. Maybe people would keep making videos, writing stories, or posting comments. But none of that mattered anymore. What mattered was the truth, the rain, the fear, the miracle that followed, and the connection that would never fade. In a world full of noise, he'd found something quiet but powerful: humanity. And as the lights of the city began to flicker on in the distance, he realized something simple but true. Heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they just happen to be walking home at the right time, with a heart brave enough to stop. A few months had passed since that rainy night, but it still felt fresh in his mind. Every time the sky turned gray and the air smelled like rain, he remembered it all: the panic, the crying, the fear, and then that first small cry that changed everything. Life had mostly gone back to normal. School, basketball, helping his mom around the house. The attention had slowly faded. The news stopped calling. The social media posts quieted down. The world had moved on to the next big thing, as it always did. And yet, some things had changed forever. Every couple of weeks, he would get a text from Maya, a photo of the baby smiling, sleeping, or wrapped in a blanket. She always wrote something sweet like, "Your little friend says hi," or "Guess who just rolled over for the first time." He didn't always reply right away, but he always smiled when he saw the messages. It was strange to think how a random walk home one evening had brought two completely different lives together like that. One Saturday morning, while he was helping his mom wash dishes, there was a knock at the door. He wiped his hands on a towel and went to open it. When he did, he froze for a second. Maya was standing there holding a small envelope in her hand. The baby, now a few months old, was nestled in a soft carrier against her chest, wide-eyed and curious. "Hey," she said with a warm smile. He blinked, surprised. "Hey, I didn't know you were coming." "I know. I wanted to surprise you." His mom appeared behind him, smiling. "Oh, look who it is. Come in, come in." They sat in the living room, and for a moment everything felt calm. The baby gurgled softly, grabbing at the air with tiny fists. His mom played with her gently while Maya turned to him and held out the envelope. "What's this?" he asked. "Just open it," she said. He carefully tore it open and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Inside was a small birth certificate, and when he read it, His breath caught in his throat. There, in neat print, was the baby's full name. Her middle name was his. He looked up at her, speechless. "I wanted you to know," Maya said softly. "I thought long and hard about it, and it just felt right. You were there when she took her first breath. You saved both of us. You're part of her story, and I wanted that to always be remembered." He couldn't find words. His eyes stung, and he tried to blink it away. "You didn't have to do that," he said quietly. "I wanted to," she replied, "because when everything fell apart that night, you were the only one who stayed. I want her to grow up knowing that kindness can come from anyone, even a stranger." His mom had tears in her eyes, too. "That's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard," she said, her voice soft. He smiled shyly, looking at the baby again. "She looks happy." "She is," Maya said, brushing a hand through the baby's fine hair. "And so am I. It's been hard, but I'm doing better. I started working again, and I'm saving for a new place." "That's great," he said. "You deserve that." Maya nodded, smiling faintly. "You know, sometimes I still think about that night and how everything could have gone differently. If you hadn't stopped to help me, I don't know what would have happened. Maybe we wouldn't be here." He looked down, remembering the cold rain, the fear in her eyes, and the sound of the baby crying for the first time. "I'm just glad I was there," he said quietly. They sat in silence for a moment, just listening to the soft cooing sounds from the baby. It was peaceful, like the world had finally slowed down enough for everything to make sense. Before leaving, Maya stood up and said, "We're having a little naming ceremony next weekend. Just a few family and friends. We'd love for you to come." "I'll be there," he said without hesitation. That night he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about the name written on that certificate. He'd never thought something like that would happen to him. He wasn't anyone special, just a kid who'd been in the right place at the right time. But maybe that was the point. Maybe that's what made it special. The following weekend he arrived at the community center where the small celebration was being held. It wasn't fancy, just a few tables, some decorations, and people chatting happily. But the atmosphere was warm and full of love. When Maya saw him walk in, her face lit up. "You came," she said, hugging him. "Of course," he said with a smile. Everyone there seemed to know who he was. They shook his hand, thanked him, told him how much they admired what he'd done. But this time it didn't feel overwhelming. It felt genuine, like he was part of something bigger than himself. At one point, Maya stood up to say a few words. The room grew quiet. "I just want to thank everyone for being here," she began. "This little girl is my miracle, and I wouldn't be standing here today without the kindness of someone who didn't even know me. When I thought I was completely alone, he showed up. He didn't hesitate. He didn't judge. He just helped." She turned toward him and smiled. "Because of him, my daughter is here. So today, I want to share something special. Her name is Hope, and her middle name is for the person who gave us both hope that night." Everyone clapped softly. He felt his face grow warm. For a moment, the noise around him faded, and all he could see was Maya holding Hope, the little baby who had unknowingly changed his life too. Later, as people mingled and music played, Maya came up to him again. "You know, I've been thinking," she said. "When Hope's older, I want her to know the full story. Not just what happened that night, but who you are. Would it be okay if you stayed in touch with us long term? Maybe even be a part of her life?" He smiled, surprised but touched. "Yeah, I'd like that." "Good," she said. "Because whether you believe it or not, you're family now." He laughed softly. "Guess I can't argue with that." As the event went on, he found himself playing with the baby, making her giggle as he held her tiny hand. She had the same calm expression she'd had when she was born, like she already understood the world better than anyone else in the room. Hours passed, and the evening sun began to set outside, painting everything in a golden glow. People started saying their goodbyes, and Maya walked him to the door. "Thank you again for coming," she said. "Thank you for inviting me," he replied. She smiled. "You know, I never told you this, but that night before you found me, I was praying. I didn't know what I was praying for. Maybe a sign, maybe someone to help me. And then you showed up. So no matter what anyone says, I'll always believe you were sent for a reason." He didn't know how to respond. He just nodded, feeling a lump in his throat. "Maybe we both were," he said softly. As he walked home, he looked up at the sky. The stars were beginning to appear one by one, tiny and bright. Everything around him felt quiet, peaceful. He thought about how small actions could ripple through the world in ways people never expected. He hadn't just delivered a baby that night. He'd delivered a message. That kindness still mattered. That even in a world full of noise and fear, people could still show up for each other. When he got home, his mom was waiting at the door. "So how was it?" she asked. He smiled, tired but happy. "It was good. Really good," she looked at him proudly. "You've grown a lot, you know. You're not just my boy anymore. You're someone's hero," he chuckled. "I don't know about hero," she nodded slowly. "Maybe not in the movie sense. But you changed lives. That's real hero stuff." He thought about that for a moment, then smiled. "Yeah, maybe you're right." Later that night, as he lay in bed, his phone buzzed. It was another message from Maya. It said, "Hope fell asleep clutching the stuffed bunny you gave her. I think it's her favorite thing now." He smiled, putting the phone down beside him. Outside, rain began to fall softly, tapping against the window. The same kind of rain from that unforgettable night. But this time it didn't feel cold or lonely. It felt peaceful, almost like a quiet reminder of how far they'd all come. He closed his eyes, listening to the rain, and thought about everything that had happened. How fear had turned into hope, how strangers had become family, and how a single choice to stop and help had changed everything. Somewhere out there, a baby was sleeping safely, a mother was rebuilding her life, and a boy who once felt ordinary was realizing that maybe the smallest acts of kindness are what make life extraordinary. And as he drifted off to sleep, one final thought stayed in his mind, and that sometimes the greatest stories don't start with heroes. They start with ordinary people who decide to care when it matters most.